These are the faces of convicted murderers who committed some really horrific crimes, like Roger Stafford, who killed Melvin and Linda Lawrence and their son Richard, or Joe Atkins, who shot 13-year-old Karen Patterson to death in her bed in North Charleston, South Carolina. Atkins cut the Pattersons' phone lines, then entered with a machete, a sawed-off shotgun, and a pistol, and then murdered his adopted father, Benjamin Atkins, 75 years old, who had worked to persuade parole authorities to release Joe from his life sentence. Or Charles Rector, on parole for a previous murder, who attacked Katie Davis in her apartment, abducted her and took her to a lake where she was beaten, gang raped, shot in the head, and repeatedly forced underwater until she drowned. Or Jeffrey Barney, who met Ruby Longsworth of Pasadena, Texas, through a prison ministry. She then helped him get paroled from an auto theft sentence. Her kindness was repaid when Barney raped and sodomized her, then strangled her with a cord. Or Robert Massey, who murdered a mother of two named Mildred Weiss in San Gabriel, California, during a follow-home robbery. Or Robert Willie, who murdered 17-year-old Faith Hathaway, whose story became the inspiration for the film Dead Man Walking. Willie and accomplice Joseph Ficcaro had been on an 8-day murder, robbery, and rape spree. Hathaway was raped by both assailants and stabbed 17 times. She was raped again after she died. Or Kenneth Boyd, who murdered his estranged wife Julie and his father-in-law Dillard Curry in Rockingham County, North Carolina. Boyd entered the home and shot them both in the presence of his own children, then ages 13, 12, and 10. If you're a lawyer, how do you defend people like these? Or better yet, why should you? Today, the Insider Exclusive presents Defending the Damned, CLS Mitigation and Consulting Services Formula for Success, and how Cindy Short and the CLS Mitigation and Consulting Services team has developed a formula for success in the building of capital defense teams to defend the innocent and the very guilty. They work hard to understand the lives of people who take the lives of others. Cindy and her team work in states where political will for execution is high and the commitment to public defender programs non-existent. They are deeply committed people who have chosen to make their mark on this world. And that is why Cindy has earned the highest respect from citizens, juries, judges, and lawyers alike as one of the best capital defense lawyers in America today. Hi, I'm Steve Murphy, and this is the Insider Exclusive, live from Kansas City, Missouri at the McAllister Law Firm and the CLS Mitigation and Consulting Services team. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Cindy Short to the show. Welcome to the show, Cindy.
Thank you.
We are talking about a subject matter today, which is defense of the damned, capital defense cases, and you are an expert in that area. You've had a lot of experience, but my first question, and our audience would love to know this, is why do you do what you do? There are many other types of legal work you could do, but you represent people that have been charged with taking the lives of others. Some of them are guilty, some of them are innocent. What drives you to do that?
Well, I think that biography drives me to do that. I am intensely curious about people and how people get into the situations that they get into. I find it is endlessly educational in terms of you have to be intensely curious. You have to be willing to suspend judgment in many ways. You have to be willing to reach into places and touch people in ways that are constantly surprising you. And those are the things that I think keep me moving forward. And what surprises me year after year after year is the depth of humanity that you find even in the worst of circumstances and the worst of places.
So in other words, every so-called apparently bad person has got some good elements in them.
Yeah, that's been my experience, with the exception of very few clients. I find that people at their core are not evil, that at their core they want to be good, but so often have not been given really the opportunities to fulfill the kind of person they could have been.
You have an organization called CLS Mitigation and Consulting Services. Tell our audience what the objective of this organization is and what do they do?
Well, I started in 2003, having been a capital defense attorney at the trial level since 1994. I knew the need nationwide for really qualified, competent mitigation specialists. And so I decided to form a group that would not just include social workers or criminal justice majors, but would incorporate the lawyer into the role of mitigation specialist so that I could blend all that I had learned in the previous 9 years and then take that to attorneys who were really in a unique circumstance of having probably been appointed to a capital case for their first time. And needing to be able to really learn about an area of law that would be foreign to them.
From my research and looking at what your organization does, it's really imperative that a jury, and I think the U.S. Supreme Court mandates this, don't they? That a jury, before they pass sentence on executing somebody, that they really look at that person's life, because everybody's life has mitigating circumstances, doesn't it?
Yes.
And what are some of the mitigating circumstances that you have found that are common to a lot of the stories of the people that have been accused and convicted?
You know, interestingly, having done it for 16 years, we see so much consistency across clients that I really feel like we have the research to know how to change outcomes. But what we find in every single case is that between the ages of 0 and 5, that the individuals, whether black, white, brown, green, gray, whatever color they are first and foremost impacted and impaired by poverty. Mm-hmm. Poverty, I believe, is one of the most disabilitating conditions that children face.
Your team usually consists of how many people, and lawyers who represent people who have been charged with capital crimes, murder and that sort of thing, they can call on your team to come in and provide these services. What are the team members that you usually have? You have yourself?
I do, yes, and I'm an attorney, so
Yeah.
I have this unique ability to bridge the gap between the world of the social worker and the world of the lawyer.
Okay.
These are two worlds in which the language is very different, and it's hard for them to talk to each other very often. But mental health is an enormously important part of what we do, and so part of my team includes a social worker who has a vast amount of experience within institutions and can diagnose. Mm-hmm. I have these cases are very document intensive, just as document intensive as are white collar crimes or complex civil matters involving corporations.
Yeah.
We may start with 40 pages of police reports. By the time we go to trial, we may have 40 banker boxes full of documents related to the life of the individual that we are working with. So it's so important for us to have a person who can collect and organize that information.
And then you have to put it all together and make a presentation so the jury clearly understands what led up
Right.
to this person committing crimes.
Right.
We have, you are going to discuss one particular case, a couple of cases, but the first one we're going to discuss is the Rick DeLong case. Mm-hmm. And I want to bring on the show right now a person that is on one of your teams on a regular basis, a jury consultant.
Yes.
And his name is Brett
Dillingham.
Dillingham. And so let's bring him on right now. Gives me great pleasure to introduce Brett Dillingham, a jury consultant. Welcome to the show, Brett.
Hi.
You have worked with Cindy for a number of years. I understand you work all over the country with her.
Uh-huh.
What do you think about her organization, CLS Mitigation and Consulting Services?
Well, they do an amazing job, and something that I've always appreciated about Cindy is, it's not only her willingness just to want to work with as many people as possible, but her judgment in figuring out what each person can bring to a team and really making the most of what they have to offer and keeping an open mind to all that.
You're working with her now on certain cases, aren't you?
Yeah.
Okay, there is one particular case that we want to use as an example of CLS in action, and that is the Rick DeLong case. And for our audience, can you just give us a real brief overview of what happened in that case, Cindy?
In the winter of 1999, there was a family living on the wrong side of the tracks in Springfield, Missouri, who were murdered. It was a little girl, a little boy, another little boy, Jimmy, Christopher, and Darlene, and their mother, who at the time was 9 months pregnant.
That was Aaron.
Aaron Vanderhoff, Vanderhoff. And that particular crime obviously captured the attention and the grief of an entire community.
And it was a small community.
It was a small, yes, it was a small community. It's middle of Missouri, Springfield, Missouri. And it certainly captured everybody's attention, and everybody had an opinion about what should happen to the person or persons that were responsible.
Mm-hmm. And the person that was charged with it was Rick DeLong.
Yes, there were 3 people charged, but Rick was certainly the most culpable one.
Now, when you bring somebody in like Brett, who's a jury consultant and a social worker, right?
That's right.
When you probably have similar feelings when you're dealing with a case like this, it isn't just the lawyer's feelings, it's also your feelings. Have you ever walked away from a case?
No, I haven't. And you know, one thing that helps me always is that where I'm starting from is we're here to save a life.
Right.
And I'm focused on what can I do to save this person's life first and foremost, and that's a kind of positive place to start as you dig into how some other lives were
Is
lost.
the reason that you start from that position is because you think that everybody has some good in them? Or maybe where they are today is because of circumstances that were beyond their control?
You know, absolutely. It's just I haven't yet met that monster, you know, that you see you know, in a movie. At the end of the day, they're all people. You know, some likable, some not very likable at all, but they're human beings.
Well, one of the things that we find, I think, from the work that we do is very often because of poverty, because of neglect, because of the abuse, that our clients are very often stuck in adolescence. They are very often stuck in a survival mode, and they're never moving up as we are able to do in a healthy home with education and with college to get to the top of that scale. And so we're always aware of how limited these clients are.
There is a chart, the circle of life events. How does that relate to someone's life?
Well, I think what I learned in the DeLong case was that we had so much information. I had mentioned earlier, starting with a very little bit of information about Rick, and by the time we went to trial, we had boxes lining the entire wall of this courtroom, 40 banker boxes. So how do you, because part of what we have to do, and part of what Brad has done for me, is help me to teach.
Yes.
And we have to be able to synthesize all of this information that we're gathering into something that will be meaningful to the jury. And so in the DeLong case, we came up with this image that we used in voir dire, that we used throughout the trial, in which we asked jurors to imagine that if you were to drop a pebble into a puddle and you saw the circles come out from that.
Domino effect.
Yes, the concentric circles. That if the center was that homicide, that worst moment of so many people's lives, as we looked at each circle, how did the circle closest impact that choice, as you said? And for that particular case, it was a love triangle.
Right.
What influenced the love triangle? Well, in that instance, it was terminal illness.
Yes.
What influenced the terminal illness? Well, then we go one circle out and it's the drug addiction. Well, what influenced the drug addiction? And we go one circle out and we see the parents are mentally ill, and on until we get to genetics. And so it was really a way for us to conceptualize and to help jurors understand why any of this mattered.
Right. Let's talk about helping jurors understand. They go through 5 stages of grief, don't they?
I think they probably do.
Tell our audience a little bit how you helped them through those 5 stages so you can have some sort of compassion, understanding, the ability to understand this defendant.
Well, you know, a lot of times when people talk about the 5 stages of grief for a person, you end up somewhere, what they call, you know, maybe acceptance or resolution. But I think for a trial attorney, you have to start there with the jury And if you in any way stand up and haven't fully accepted what your client did do, and of course sometimes your client didn't do some things
Yeah.
that you need not accept, but you have to fully accept what they did do and stand up there willing at the first moment you meet that jury to show that you're there to be held accountable and responsible for that. And that has to be your starting place with them if you expect them to take that journey with you at all and not just stop at anger.
Do you think the majority of people who sit on a jury take this responsibility, this awesome responsibility of choosing life or death? Do you think they really consider this such a major responsibility?
Yes. I mean, I'm not saying that all of them are fit to serve on a capital jury, and of course a huge part, if Cindy's doing her job, she is connecting with the people, and at the end of the day, they might all feel like they'd like to sit down and have a cup of coffee with her, and my job is to try to help identify those that really shouldn't be invited to the coffee table. So, because I mean, I think everybody takes. It's my belief everybody on a jury really takes their job seriously, but not everybody comes in a capital case with a mind open to a life sentence, and for a multitude of reasons.
Yeah, there is another case of somebody you helped. The mother is here today, Sarah Boyd, that I want to bring on right now so she can discuss what Cindy and her team did for them. And thank you very much for being on the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's my great pleasure to introduce Sarah Boyd to the show. Welcome to the show, Sarah. You have a son that has experienced the criminal justice system, right?
You're right.
Was convicted, I think, or arrested in 1999. He was originally convicted of second-degree murder, was it? First-degree murder. And the conviction was overturned in 2004. Were you part of the overturning of that conviction?
I was part of the entire process,
Right.
From arrest to his release, really, in September of '09. And so, yes, I was there and
So he
part
ended
of the
up
team.
serving 10 years. He ended up, and you were able to bring all the assets that you have in your CLS Mitigation and Consulting Services team to bear, so that the court ended up giving him only a 10-year sentence, or time served, basically, right?
Yeah, well,
Tell us a little bit about what your organization did to help her son was able to get out of jail.
Well, Sarah and her family were so actively involved in the case from the very beginning, and there was such an enormous network of people who cared about Jim. And so we were
And Jim is 19, right?
Right.
Okay.
And so we were really able to harness those relationships and people from the education system and from church community, and everyone really cared about this family and about Jim. And so they were willing along the way to help in many, many ways, from visiting him to sitting down in interviews with us to ultimately testifying for him.
This was his second trial that you brought all this in.
It
This was in front of a jury?
It was just in front of a judge.
Judge.
Yes.
Okay. So judges usually aren't that compassionate. You must have done an outstanding job to make him see that there were mitigating circumstances. What did you think about everything she did for your son?
I obviously don't have words. I mean,
Yeah.
he has a life now, and I owe it to Cindy,
Yeah.
and so does he, and he does too. From the beginning, from the relationship she built with him, and I think that somehow, or she knew that in order for him to stay strong and hopeful and to trust her, that she needed to do that with me, primarily, the rest of my family,
Right.
and friends, and that takes a lot of time to get to know somebody who's so vulnerable and hurt and powerless.
How old is he now?
He's 30.
30.
30.
Okay. So this happened when he was 19.
He was 19.
I see. And, well, it's good that he's he's living a productive life. I understand he's a student.
Yes.
You're a living example of what Cindy and her team can do for someone when they consider all the mitigating circumstances. And I want to thank you very much for taking the time to share with us.
Thank you.
Cindy, we've heard from one of your clients and also one of your team members of what assets you bring to the table with CLS Mitigation and Consulting Services. How can lawyers who are representing clients who are faced with capital cases right now, how can they get in touch with you, and what is the procedure in making this work for them?
Well, I think generally the way they get in touch with me is through a referral, through other lawyers that they know. They call me here and we begin a conversation.
Right.
And I like to make sure that they are willing to go the long haul and that they are willing to be very collaborative.
Okay, when you say, because I read this in your article that you had in The Warrior, some lawyers don't like being collaborative. And how do they become collaborative?
Well, I think they've got to be open to a new journey because it is about teamwork. It is about a group. It's about group think. And so many of us as attorneys are out there all by ourselves. And now here's this really great opportunity to work with a team.
Well, you're doing wonderful work, and we certainly thank you for taking some time and telling our audience the fine work that you do, because it's needed, no question about it. When the United States Supreme Court mandates that mitigating circumstances have to be considered in capital defense cases, you're there to fill that bill, and I want to thank you very much for sharing with us on our show.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.